Welcome to the Software Report, a leading information source on software companies and solutions. In this episode, we speak with Scott Sellers, President, CEO, and co-founder of Azul Systems, a company dedicated exclusively to building high-performance Java runtime solutions. Founded in 2002, Azul provides trusted, standards-compliant Java platforms used by 36% of the Fortune 100 and many of the world's leading enterprises. Its products, including Zulu and Zing, power mission-critical applications that require speed, reliability, and scalability. Before founding Azul, Scott co-founded 3DFX Interactive, a pioneering graphics processor company later acquired by NVIDIA. At Azul, he leads a global team focused on advancing Java performance and value for developers and enterprises worldwide. I'm your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoy the show. If you like the episode, click to follow. Scott, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you, RJ. Appreciate you having me on.
So you're not going to believe this, but I was actually on the investment banking team that sold 3DFX to NVIDIA. I was with Robertson Stephens.
Back in the day, yeah.
That's your baby.
That was one of my babies, Azul being my second one here. But yeah, those were fun times. The 90s, there was a lot of fascinating things going on in the world of chip design and certainly in the world of graphics. We had a great ride with 3DFX, and as you know, took them public. Robbie Stephens was our underwriter, helping us going public as well. And yeah, ultimately, we sold that to NVIDIA in 2000.
And who would have thought that NVIDIA would turn out to what it is today? I mean, did you have any inclination that it would be this behemoth?
I don't think anyone did, honestly. I mean, certainly have huge amount of respect for NVIDIA and did at the time. You know, the one thing that I think has really allowed NVIDIA in general to be so successful, and this is certainly true back in the graphics wars, you know, in the mid to late 90s when we experienced it, NVIDIA's ability to execute is just second to none. They have an incredible ability, like clockwork, that they're able to just continue to crank out whatever it is that they're designing. Could be the next graphics chip, could be the next AI accelerator, et cetera, et cetera. Their ability to execute on chip design is just truly extraordinary. And, you know, that's ultimately what allowed them to be so successful in winning the graphics war, and certainly has propelled them. I think they're still the most valuable company in the world now, right? They still hold that title. So super impressive. And, you know, all credit to Jensen and that team. They just have an unbelievable ability to execute.
Well, speaking about ability to execute, I feel like you learned that early on. You were both the quarterback and the punter on your university college team. Is that correct?
Well, for those that remember football history, they called me the Danny White of the Princeton Tigers. He, if you remember from the Cowboys, was both a quarterback and a punter. Yep. So yes, I did a little bit of both, which was great. You know, that experience playing football taught me a ton, and playing football and going to such a great school like Princeton, that was a very challenging thing. And I was an electrical engineer, so I really had a pretty heavy workload, you know, managing both my academics and the athletics. And what was remarkable about that era, if you will, was you really could be a student athlete and participate at a very high level of athletics, but then also not be completely beholden to your sport. And I think that's gotten harder and harder as time has evolved with college athletics these days. But I really enjoyed, you know, not only the academic rigor of Princeton and what I pursued, but certainly being part of the football team. And when we were seniors, which was very cool, we won the Ivy League for the first time in 25 years. So there's a special thing about the class of 90 Princeton football team that we, you know, really had a wonderful group of men and lifelong friends. And in fact, one of my teammates, Bob Cerise, is the current Princeton head football coach. So I still stay involved with the Princeton program, which is great.
Amazing. And your reunions are incredible every year. You know, living here, I kind of like live through that, you know, it's all around you and there's the fireworks. You know, if there's one thing I noticed about Princeton grads is, you know, they are some very smart people, can be talented in multiple different areas, including sports, but there's a level of humility to them. And I've always found that to be exceptional for a person to have that quality, knowing that they've got these incredible skills. Did you find that to be the trait that a lot of students had?
It's really emphasized. I mean, kind of the mantra that you hear a lot about when you're there is in the nation's service. And that's really how Princeton positions itself and how they continue to educate their students. And it's not just about self-pursuit. It's about being involved with broader initiatives. And I think that kind of mentality and that kind of culture that really permeates Princeton has really allowed for a very strong alumni network that thinks very broadly about ways that we can contribute, whether that's in politics or in community or in, various other areas. And that was wonderful to be part of. And you really still feel that today. There's an incredible connection within the Princeton alumni group overall, and couldn't be more proud to be part of that.
So you sell 3DFX to NVIDIA, and do you immediately start on your next company?
No. So I was ready to do something new. And, having done graphics for about a decade, because I began my career at Silicon Graphics and then startup company that then was acquired. And then we left that to start 3DFX. So I was about 10 years into all sorts of different things in the graphics domain. And I was interested in pursuing some other things. And so I was doing the usual thing that you do. You kind of start thinking about ideas to start companies, you start networking. And I was introduced to a couple of people that ultimately were the co-founders with me of Azul through a mutual friend. One of the graphics architects that I had hired at 3DFX introduced me to Gil Tanay, who was one of the co-founders and our CTO. And they were talking about this thing called Java, which I had heard of, but was really not that familiar. But one of the things that really intrigued me was an opportunity to build something that we thought was very transformative for the enterprise segment. And, at Silicon Graphics, I had worked primarily in kind of scientific computing. And then obviously at 3DFX, it was more very much focused on the consumer side and the OEM business to some degree. And what I became intrigued with was an opportunity to build a company that was serving the enterprise customer base, if that was going to be new. And I thought very interesting. And what was also very appealing was that one of the things that happens in the graphics market is that there's a very close cooperation between the chip designers and the software engineers. And so you do this co-design of building kind of the perfect chip to meet the needs of what the software engineers would like to do. And so we took that philosophy when we first started Azul, because Azul initially was a hardware company, and we built silicon chips, actually custom microprocessors that were highly tuned and optimized for running Java-based workloads in enterprise. And we built kind of the perfect Java CPU with the applications and Java applications in mind. And, that was how we began Azul.
And how long before you decided to shed the hardware piece to the business?
Yeah. So, Azul was started with some incredible venture capitalists. We had really a who's who of Excel partners and Redpoint. And ultimately, we brought on others like Credit Suisse and just fantastic a set of backers. Meritech was involved with that. And part of that experience was that we very aggressively, really ramped up to build kind of a long-term hardware roadmap. For us, the inflection point was in 2008. And as all companies were really forced to make some hard decisions. And what we were going through at the time was that we had built 3 generations of these compute appliances, custom hardware, all that. And we had acquired over 100 customers in the enterprise sector that were running truly business critical workloads on these compute appliances that we'd sold them. And we were getting fantastic feedback. Our enterprise customers were telling us that Java is the backbone of all the application development that we're doing. It's incredibly important and part of our long-term future. More and more applications were being developed, in Java, et cetera, et cetera. Our customers loved our technology. We were getting great feedback, in terms of us as a global company being able to support these very demanding applications and need across the globe. But the big but was we want to do all this, but we really just want software, right? We want to be able to have great flexibility, be able to deploy on-prem in the cloud. Hybrid was, that whole era of cloud computing coming on strong at that point. Commodity servers were getting really, really inexpensive. And so the ability to deploy on commodity servers, popularity of Linux, all these things were kind of coming together. And, we were selling these compute appliances. So we were to some degree kind of fighting macro trends at that point. So we had the benefits of, we were right on Java. We were definitely right on the need to have, in essence, a better Java runtime, but we were fighting the stream in terms of how that product ultimately could and should be procured and deployed by the customer. So 2008, as the world was caving in and all companies really had to make some very tough decisions in terms of how you're going to get through that. For us, that was an important inflection point that we decided at that point that we needed to pivot the company and focus on pure software products. And ultimately that transforms your operating model as a company, transforms the way that you go about raising money for the continued development of the product. It always takes more money and more time to get out of a complex business like hardware. So, it took us a number of years to do that. But ultimately, I think what allowed us to be successful with such a transition was that we stayed true to our customers. Every existing customer that we had with the hardware product, we put a plan in place to eventually move them to the software product offering. That went a long way in terms of just the customers appreciating that we were there for them, that we weren't going to immediately end of life our hardware products and tell them good luck. We really were there to support them. And I think that really solidified Azul's reputation as a very customer-centric company that was always going to stand by our customers and do the best we could, even through some difficult transitions. So I think that mentality has really served us very well through the years.
And your software solution is well known among large enterprises and I think across sectors. Maybe could you give us some high level, maybe some key stats on how pervasive Azul is in corporate enterprise?
Absolutely. So we have hundreds of millions of downloads a year of our Java runtime, which is called Zulu. And for those of you that don't know, all of Java is developed in the open source community. So there's an open source project called OpenJDK. It's arguably the most successful open source project ever. And I would even include very successful projects, for example, like Linux as part of that. And the reason I make that statement is because Java has never forked or fragmented. When you say that you are running Java version 21 and you have a Java runtime that supports Java 21, that really means something. And it means that you not only adhere to the spec, but it also means that you pass hundreds of thousands of compatibility tests. That's called the TCKs. And the fact that there has been truly a who's who of the biggest, most important software and technology companies in the world that support and extend and evolve Java as part of the OpenJDK project. And we've all done that while maintaining backwards compatibility across different Java runtimes within a Java version. All these things has really made Java continue to be really the dominant language for enterprise computing, and one which really represents the backbone of most enterprise workloads that deal with transaction logic and business logic and those types of things. And so our products are all based on the OpenJDK project. We have a combination of pure open source projects freely available, like, for example, the Zulu JDK that I mentioned. But then we also have products called Platform Core and Platform Prime. And these are paid offerings. And Platform Core specifically is a curated, highly secure build of OpenJDK that our enterprise customers buy when they need long-term support. They need an alternative to, for example, Oracle. When they acquired Sun, they inherited the Java business. And so Oracle, over time, has continued to restrict the license under which Oracle Java can be used. They've continued to increase pricing. So many of our customers around the world are looking for truly a drop-in equivalent to Oracle Java, but one that is inherently open source and much more cost-effective. And so that's what's called our Platform Core business that has really flourished through the years as more and more enterprises are looking to move off Oracle Java. We have a performance JVM that is called Platform Prime, and Platform Prime is in essence better than OpenJDK. We start with that OpenJDK foundation that I mentioned, but then we enhance it in a number of ways. We enhance it with a better compiler, which emits faster code. We enhance it with a better garbage collector, which helps with the pauses and hiccups that are oftentimes associated when running Java workloads at scale. We enhance it to improve some other of the challenges when you deploy Java workloads in terms of how long it takes an application to start up and to get full speed, et cetera, et cetera. So we've really built all sorts of technologies that allow for Java computing at scale with large scale cloud deployments in a very, very cost-effective manner. And so Platform Prime is that product offering that really serves, for example, speeds and feeds like the banking sector. If you're running a trading application or that sort of infrastructure based on Java, you're probably running on Platform Prime today. We've done exceptionally well in that space. Ad tech, gaming, large e-commerce, these are market segments that we've done exceptionally well in terms of a disproportionate amount of wins in those sectors. And, really for us, Platform Prime is about the speeds and feeds markets like electronic trading, but it's also, and this is kind of the emerging huge amount of growth that we've seen, is that in the world of cloud computing, everyone complains about spending more than they want to in the cloud and sort of victim of their own success, right? A lot of activity happening in the cloud, and more workloads being deployed in the cloud, many of those workloads being Java. In fact, a lot of the surveys that we and others have done show that over half of the typical enterprise spend is actually being spent in the cloud running Java workloads. So there's a lot of money being spent in Java workloads in the cloud. Platform Prime can be used to be able to reduce that amount of cloud spending and for our customers in the cloud. And so the real two main use cases for Platform Prime are speeds and feeds and latency and, all that kind of thing. And then cloud cost optimization. Both those segments are really growing quite impressively. And we're very proud of the success we've had in those.
Speaking to the growth, when you're dealing with your clients, are you selling into these corporate IT departments? And say you could have, say, for example, one of the big financial institutions, JP Morgan or B of A, and you have an existing relationship, but you can sell more because it's like a consumption model, or do you kind of upgrade to a larger enterprise kind of relationship where you say like, okay, we understand what you're going to deploy, the technology you're going to deploy in the next year, let's upgrade to this kind of new tier?
Yeah. So it's a little bit of mix of both. Everything we sell is on a subscription basis. So it's not purely consumptive like you might think about other products, but customers will sign up for a certain quantity for 1, 2, 3 years, kind of depend on the time frame that they're interested in purchasing. And then as time evolves, as they see success with something like Platform Prime as an example, they just continue to buy more. And so it's a fairly traditional business practice in that regard, subscription based. And as you consume more, they look to buy more for their future needs. And so that's fairly straightforward in terms of kind of the business model and how that works.
You mentioned you raised a lot of VC in the beginning. I presume during that 2008 timeframe, there's a little bit of a recap, or maybe some investors have transitioned out, some have come in. What is your capital base like today? And maybe if you could just shed some light on how your current investors have played a role aside from providing financial capital.
So I mentioned kind of the origins of our funding. The next kind of major inflection point for us was in 2020 when we partnered with Vitruvian Partners out of London and Lead Edge Capital out of New York. Mm-hmm. And that was a fantastic moment for us because, we in essence transitioned to a new investor base. So, those that were previous investors in Azul were able to have a nice outcome. And Vitruvian and Lead Edge came in and they became the majority owners in Azul moving forward. And that relationship has been fantastic. So now we're, a little over 5 years into that relationship. We've gone through some interesting times with COVID, and like any other company that kind of managed through that, their support was just exceptional, absolutely unwavering. And every company has different challenges going through COVID, but we managed through that. And, really, I think what's been invaluable with Vitruvian and Lead Edge is really just they have a wonderful strategic insight in terms of how to think about long-term value. And a lot of the time that we spend with them is thinking about how do we build a great company together? How do we think about the most important strategic initiatives? How do we think about, for example, should we acquire companies in the future as we continue to grow to be able to fuel the growth, et cetera? Those things are really invaluable and ultimately very important that, that's what the board is all about, is to be able to continue to think 3-5 years ahead and, really kind of force those conversations so that you really have a clear roadmap of where you're headed. And those conversations are really enlightening because a lot of what you end up talking about, maybe you don't do because there's, always a lot more potential to do than you can practically do. But those conversations are very invaluable because it really forces you to prioritize, to crystallize who do we want to be in 3 to 5 years? How do we think about Azul in 3 to 5 years? And that's an evolving conversation inevitably. And just the expertise that Vitruvian has and Lead Edge, they're fantastic. They have all sorts of other portfolio companies that they also learn from. That's invaluable for us as well. And I think that word partnership, sometimes it gets overused, but that's the way I think about our relationship with Vitruvian and Lead Edge, is a true partnership to be able to work together to build a great company moving forward.
Having been a quarterback, you've probably learned a lot about leadership early on. And I'm always interested to hear how kind of sports helped inform your leadership style and how you set the culture of your company. So, what's the culture like at Azul?
Well, I like to think that we are a very professional organization. I can contrast that with 3D Effects. 3D Effects, we were all in our kind of 20s. It was just a bit of the wild, wild west in the graphics wars at that point. And obviously, we were a lot younger. And many of us also were really learning firsthand to be managers, to be leaders, and, certainly many bumps along the road. I think Azul, partly because, we now have more experience under our belt. I'd say that we've tried to create a culture that, really recognizes and places a high order on a professional work environment, one that values hiring great people and giving them the authority to do their jobs, trying to stay away from micromanagement, and really creating a very positive work culture that, eliminates politics and fiefdoms and, really encourages teamwork. And ultimately, getting back to your question on my sports background, I always loved participating in team sports, right? Whether it was football or basketball or other things when I was younger. And that's the way I feel about Azul as well, is that this isn't just about me, right? I'm helping direct the company, but it's really all about us. And I think that ability to hire the right people that understand the importance of teamwork, that we're all in this together. Inevitably, different groups may have different challenges, right? Could have engineering goes through a phase where, maybe there's product issues, more bugs than we'd like to see, and you really got to rally around and help them. Or sales may have a tough quarter where maybe we weren't able to hit our goals. But by just emphasizing the importance of staying together, being together, we all win as a team. Even those occasional losses, we lose as a team as well. And have a short memory, always look forward, never get too high, never get too low, right? It's the same thing you kind of hear on Sunday commentary in the NFL. It's the same kind of philosophy and culture that we try to instill here.
Last two questions. These are my standard closing questions. One is, can you tell us about a person who's had a profound influence on you?
Well, there's been many. One of my investors along the way was a guy named Terry Dubon. He was part of a venture firm called JVAX. And he was with us for a lot of that transition from the hardware part of the business to the software and going through that whole transition. And Terry served as our chairman of our board during that time. And I really look at him as one of my mentors, and just phenomenal person, phenomenal mentor, always had the big picture in mind, and really, really leaned on him through some challenging times through that. And so certainly Terry is way up there on my list of people that really have impacted me personally and professionally.
Last question. Can you tell us about a charity cause or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
Well, we do a lot. My wife and I are very involved with a variety of different things, mostly local charities. We really feel giving back locally is very important. And so, my wife is very involved in a number of these that I'm also very supportive of. So, the one I would highlight, specific to your question, is there's an organization, it's a national organization that we're involved with locally called CASA. It's a court-appointed special advocate group. And this is all about having volunteers partner with the court system to basically help juveniles that are at risk or in trouble. And the volunteers get involved with the juveniles to help them, provide support, provide them guidance. And you can imagine there's some very tough situations that many of the youth locally go through. And so we're very proud to support that and to be active in that organization.
Scott, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you, RJ. Really appreciate it.